Every border you see on a map of the Middle East today, from the Jordanian desert to the Lebanese coast, is less than 100 years old. For 6 centuries, the region was a patchwork of provinces, tribal confederations, and religious communities, all loosely organized under the Ottoman Sultan in Istanbul. Then, between 1914 and 1918, a small group of British and French diplomats sat in London hotel rooms and redrew everything with pencils. They drew lines straight through mountain ranges, lines that cut between villages, lines that separated Kurds from Arabs and Druze from Maronites. The men drawing these lines, Sir Mark Sykes and François-Georges Picot, had spent a combined total of about 2 weeks actually visiting the region they were carving up. They were not thinking about ancient rivalries or local loyalties, they were thinking about pipelines, ports, and how to keep their empires supplied with oil. Almost a century later, when ISIS fighters bulldozed the border between Syria and Iraq, they called it breaking the Sykes-Picot line. They knew exactly who to blame for the lines they were trying to erase. To understand the lines, you have to understand the war. The Ottoman Empire entered World War I on the side of Germany, betting that a quick victory would preserve their crumbling rule. Britain responded by sending armies through the Suez Canal, pushing into Palestine and Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. But the British had a problem. They didn't have enough troops to fight the Turks everywhere, so they made a deal with a man named Hussein, the Sharif of Mecca. In a series of letters exchanged between July 1915 and March 1916, the British High Commissioner in Egypt, Sir Henry McMahon, promised Hussein that if the Arabs revolted against the Ottomans, Britain would recognize an independent Arab state. And Dani de Brigançois. The proposed state would cover most of the Levant, including modern Syria, Jordan, and much of Iraq. There was just one ambiguous phrase: portions of Syria lying to the west were excluded. Hussein launched the revolt. T.E. Lawrence, who would later become known as Lawrence of Arabia, helped coordinate it. The Arabs fought, they died, and well, they helped the British win. But while Hussein was reading McMahon's letters, 2 other men were meeting in London. Sykes and Picot were negotiating a completely different deal. In May 1916 they signed an agreement that divided the same land into spheres of influence. France would get modern Syria and Lebanon marked in blue. Britain would get modern Jordan and Iraq, marked in red. Palestine, because of its religious significance, was marked in brown, designated for international administration, though the details were left deliberately vague. This was the contradiction at the heart of the modern Middle East. The British had promised the Arabs one thing, and the French another. They had promised both and hoped no one would notice. Then, in November 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia. They ransacked the Tsarist Foreign Ministry archives, found the secret Sykes-Picot Agreement, and published it for the world to see. The Arabs were reading in black and white that while they were bleeding in the desert, the Europeans had already decided who would rule them. When the war ended, the victors gathered at Versailles to formalize the New World Order. The Arabs sent a delegation, led by Hussein's son Faisal, expecting to collect on the British promise. They got the mandate system instead. The League of Nations declared that the peoples of the Middle East were not yet able to stand by themselves and needed the tutelage of advanced nations. France got Syria and carved out a separate Lebanon to protect the Maronite Christians. Britain got Iraq, Palestine, and a new entity called Transjordan, created to give Faisal's brother Abdullah a throne. The borders were drawn with almost no regard for the people living inside them. Kurds were split between 4 countries. Sunni and Shia Arabs were forced into the same state. In 1921, Winston Churchill, then colonial secretary, convened a conference in Cairo with a stack of maps and a box of compasses. In a matter of days, he finalized the borders of modern Iraq and Jordan. He was, by his own admission, creating kingdoms with, a wave of a pen. The only question that really mattered was who got the oil. A century later, those lines are still there, but honestly, the pressure beneath them has never stopped building. The idea that a Shia Arab from Baghdad has more in common with a Sunni Arab from Damascus than with a Shia Persian from Tehran, that was, well, a European assumption, not a local reality. The Kurds never got their state. The Palestinians never got theirs. The borders that were supposed to bring stability have produced nearly a century of conflict. The men who drew these lines are long dead. They never had to live with the consequences. We do. The messy lines on the map are not just ink. They're identities forced together, peoples torn apart, and promises that were, honestly, never kept. The First World War ended in 1918, but in the Middle East, it never really did. Subscribe to War Machiner and, hey, share this if you value history that goes deeper.